welcome to today's tutorial where we're going to be crocheting a book sleeve using this granny square pattern. So I'm going to go through with you how to make the granny square first, and then we'll look at joining them together to create the book sleeve. You will need 4 colours. I'm not sure if you can tell as clearly through the video here, but there is a white for the petals here, and then a creamy, I think they call this, yes, off-white. I'm using Yarn Smith's Cotton DK for this. Any DK yarn will work. These are the 4 colours that I have chosen. Again, you can choose any 4 colours that you are happy works well for your book sleeve, maybe coincides with the book that you're reading or matches the book cover. So there's lots of flexibility with that, but I am using a DK cotton with a 4mm crochet hook. You will also need some scissors for cutting your ends and a yarn needle to weave in your ends. So I'm just going to pop the bits to the side and start with my first colour, the inside colour here. So just pop these bits to the side. This is all I have left, so that should be enough. Okay, so what have I done here? So to start with, I'm gonna create a magic ring. Now, if you are unsure or not confident in making a magic ring, I do have a separate tutorial on that, but you can chain 4 and slip stitch into the first chain and work into the center of that circle. But for a magic ring, I'm gonna wrap the yarn around my 2 fingers, go under the first loop, over the second, twist my hook as I pull that up, and then take a, let's try that again. Take that around 2 fingers, under the first, over the second, twist the hook, and then hook that yarn through to secure in place. I can remove my fingers, and there we have our ring there. So I'm then going to chain 2. So I'm going to take the yarn over the hook, pull through the loop 1, yarn over the hook through the loop 2. So that is counts as my first treble. So I'm going to be taking treble crochets into the magic ring here. I am using UK terminology. If you work with US terminology, that is a double crochet. So I'm going to take the yarn over the hook, take the hook into the middle of the magic ring, take that yarn over and pull through, then yarn over again. We're going to go through 2 loops, then yarn over and through 2 loops. So we're going to take 7 treble crochets. So that was our first one. So let's go with number 2. Yarn over through the center, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Number 3, yarn over into the center, yarn over, pull up, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops. On to number 4, yarn over into the center, yarn over, pull up, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops. Number 5, yarn over into the center, yarn up, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And then we want to take 2 more treble crochets. Last one. So we should have our beginning chain to count as 1, and then we should have 8 altogether. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. And so from there we can then close our magic ring by pulling on the end of the yarn there. And I'm going to cut the yarn, making sure there's enough length to weave in our ends there. And I still have a little bit less, that's quite nice. Now, I am going to join all my rounds with an invisible join. If that is not something you are comfortable with, you can take a slip stitch into the top of your chain 2 to end that round, but I am going to do an invisible join. So I'm gonna take out and place the yarn into the needle. Now, with an invisible join, this is going to create our final stitch. So we want to work into our 7th stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because this is going to create our 8th stitch. So I'm going to go into here, maneuver that circle a little bit. There we go. And then the same stitch that I've just come from, I'm going to go into that stitch, but also into that back bump as well. And just make sure nice and clear. There we go. Tighten that up. Oh, at the end there. There we go. So we don't want it too tight because we're going to work into that stitch, but you can see there that we've got our stitch here. So then I like to come over to that chain 2 and then just for extra, making sure it's not too tight, not too loose, for extra security, I am going to double knot. And everyone does it differently, but I'm a crocheter that likes to weave in my ends as I go along. So I am going to weave in my ends now. Have I pulled that too tight? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, I've pulled that too tight. I need to loosen that up a bit. So that's what we need to be careful of. There we go. That's better. So I am going to weave my ends around the middle of the magic ring there. And then to make sure we're doubly secure, I'm going to come back and I'm just going to go into the yarn as well. Take a couple of threads. Like that. And cut my end off. So I've done one. And do exactly the same with the second one. Now the reason I like to do an invisible join is because the next round we're going to be working into the top of the stitch, and I find with the invisible join you can just clearly see where that stitch is, and I find with the slip stitch you get a little bit of a bump, if that makes sense, and then I just feel that it looks a bit strange at the end. It wouldn't change the effect of how the square would look, it's just my preference on how to work with it. So there we have our first round, the center of our granny square. So then we're going to take our second color, which for my granny square is white. So I'm going to take a slip knot by taking the yarn around my finger. So I've got a cross shape here. I'm going to go under that first piece of yarn, over the second, and pull it through. Then I can remove my finger and tighten up onto the hook there. Then we can work into any stitch, place that hook through, and we're going to slip stitch it on to that chain. So with our hook, pull the yarn through, hold it in place to then pull that same piece of yarn through our loop there. And then we're going to chain 2, so 1, 2, and we're going to work trebles again. Now with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this piece of yarn across so that I can weave in this end as I go along. You absolutely don't have to do that. You can leave it out and weave it in at the end, but it just saves a little bit of time, I find. So I'm going to hold that across to work with it. So I'm going to take 2 more trebles into this same stitch. So I've taken my yarn over into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and I'm going to do that again. Remember, if you're US terminology, this is a double crochet, but I tend to use UK terminology, which is why I'm calling it a treble. So we have our starting chain here and then 2 trebles. So now we're going to work 3 trebles in each stitch around. So I'm going to take that yarn over into the next stitch, yarn up, yarn over 2 loops, yarn over 2 loops. So that was my first one, and we have a cluster of 3 treble crochets into the stitch. Now I'm not chaining 1 in between, I'm just moving straight over to take a treble into the next stitch. So yarn over, we go, yarn over, pull up, take the yarn over again through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops, and we take 2 more trebles for our cluster of 3. And we do that all the way around. Now if you are holding your end in like I am, around halfway round, or depending on how much yarn you've got left, after I've done 2 of my cluster of 3, I then remove this, because what I will do is I will weave it back the other direction once I've finished. So I'm just going to move that out the way, take my 3rd treble, and then I can continue with my 3 trebles all the way around. So I've got 3 more stitches left, so I'm just gonna pick up my pace a little bit as we make our way around. Oh, try that again. There we go. So 1, 2, 3, and our last stitch, 1, 2, and 3. So there we have it. So again, same as our first round. If your preference is to slip stitch, you can slip stitch to the top of your chain 2 here. My preference is an invisible join. So I'll show you one more time. So we don't want to go into the top of the chain 2. If you see where your cluster of 3 is, you want to go into the 2nd stitch, because you're going to create that 3rd stitch here. So we go all the way through the stitch, then we go back into the center of where we've just come, plus the back bump there. Pull that through, remember, not too tight, not too loose, so about there. Then I'm just going to make my way down. I'm just trying to get through there, but that's not going to work, so I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. Again, making sure we're not too tight, not too loose, and I'm going to go across here, and then I'm just going to find a little bit of yarn there to go in. So I'm going to go into this one, and I'm going to place through the loop there just to create a little bit of a knot there. Then I'm going to make my way, weave through a couple of stitches here, and I'm going to do the same again. I like to be, depending on what I'm making, I like to be extra cautious. I think it's better to be extra secure to make sure it doesn't come undone. And back through. There we go. And then this is the one that I weaved as we were doing the trebles along. So all I'm going to do with that one is go in between the yarn there and pull through, and I'm happy that's nice and secure. There. Okay, so we now have our 2 rounds, so we're moving on to our 3rd colour, which for me is the blue. And on round 3, this is where we're moving to create the granny style square. So with your 3rd colour, take a slip knot. So I'm going, we've got our X going under the 1st, over the 2nd, and pull through, removing finger. So you're looking to work in between those cluster of 3s. So there are 3 trebles, so we're going to work either side of them. I'm going to start with the corner of the granny square. So I'm going to take my hook into that space between the cluster of 3, take the yarn over, pull it through, and then pull that piece of yarn through the loop there. So slip stitching it into place and chaining 2. 1, 2. So we want to create 2 more doubles here. So 1 and 2. Then this is going to be a corner, so we want to chain 1 for the corner, and in then that same space we're going to create 3 more treble crochets. So taking that yarn over and up, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops, and we're going 2 more times, and that will create our first corner. You can see that there. So what I did with the end was I weaved that along as I crocheted denim, just like I did when I did the 2nd round with the white here. So then I'm going to leave that out the way and I will weave that back in at the end. Now we're coming over to the next space between those 3 trebles. I'm not going to chain, I'm just going to take 3 treble crochets straight into that space. So we have 1 treble, 2 and 3. So for this we want 4 corners and 4 sides. So we've done our first side, first corner. So finding our next space between the 3 treble crochets here is going to be another corner. So for our corner we're taking 3 treble crochets. So that yarn over into the space, yarn over and up, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops. So there are our first 3 treble crochets. We chain 1 for our corner, then we take another 3 treble crochets to create our second corner. There we go. So we've got a corner and a side here. So we're just moving straight over to our next space between our 3 treble clusters. We're creating a side, so that is 3 treble crochets. So 1, 2 and 3, finding our next space. We're making a corner, so 3 treble crochets, 1, 2, 3, chain 1 and another 3 treble crochets, and you can see that it's starting to come together now. There you go. So next space between our 3 cluster trebles is a side, so we're just taking the one set of 3 trebles here. So 1, 2 and 3. So here's our next space, will be our final corner. So we're taking our 3 trebles, we're chaining 1 to create that corner space, and then in the same space we take another set of 3 trebles. 1, 2, 3, and then we have our final side. There we have, all worked out well. That's what we like. Because I have done it before where I've worked around and gone, oh, I've run out and I've missed a stitch. There we go. Right, so as before with the final 2 rounds, if you want to slip stitch, please do. I will create that invisible join. So from here, that is your chain 1. So then we have 1 stitch, 2 stitch, and we want to create the 3rd stitch here. And remember, you go in the middle and then into that back bump as well. And I would like to weave my ends in the corner because there's just more yarn there. So normally I would go into the corner here, and then coming across will hopefully just make that nice and secure as well. So I'm just going to go back into that top loop and come over. There, so that looks nice, not too tight, not too loose. And then make my way down to the corner here. So as we did before, I'm just going to find a piece of yarn to take my needle through and create a little knot by placing the needle through the loop there and up. And then I can weave through here. I'm going to do the same on this stitch. Oh, lost my yarn. I'm going to do the same on that stitch. And weave back through to keep it nice and secure. And finally, work this one back through by just going into the yarn there and through. There we go. All right, so I'm going to cut those ends off, and we're creating the small border around our granny square with our 4th colour, which I've got the off-white colour here. So starting the same again with our slip knot. So I'm taking a cross around my finger under the first piece of yarn over the second and pull that through, and then I can remove my finger. here. So I'm going to start in a corner, and instead of joining with a slip knot, I'm going to join with a double crochet. So just remembering I work with UK terminology, so that's a single crochet with US terminology. So in that corner, I'm going to take my hook through, pull the yarn through, so I've got my 2 loops, take that yarn over, and I'm just going to hold that end piece of yarn in place. And then, there we go, I've got to pull through 2 loops. Then I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to take another double crochet in. So I'm taking the hook through, pull the yarn up. I've got my 2 loops. I'm going to take that yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Then along each stitch, I'm going to take a double crochet. So as we've done before, I'm going to hold this along to weave in as we go along, but you do not have to do that. You want to make sure that we've created a little corner here. Make sure that that's not hiding the final stitch here. So the first stitch is actually this one here. So I'm going to pull that yarn through. We've got our 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And I'm going to do that, creating a nice little border around our square. When I get to about halfway is when I tend to remove, if you are taking that with you, I tend to move that out the way. When we get about halfway, so we're coming into each stitch, and then when we get to our corner, which is here, so this is our chain 1 that we did for the corner, we're going to take 1 double crochet, chain 1 to create that corner, and in the same corner space take another double crochet, and then we're working along each stitch into the side. So I'm going to go along this side, show you one more corner, and then I'll skip ahead. So it's a nice little pattern because really all we've used is treble crochet and double crochet so far. So there's our corner. So we're taking 1 double, chain 1 for another corner, and in the same space a double crochet. So you can see it coming together now. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to finish up here and weave in those final ends, and I'll join you with that completed square. Okay, so I finished the granny square. Again, I chose to do an invisible join because when we're joining the squares, my preference is the invisible join so that we can clearly see where each stitch is to match them up and join together. It's not a necessity. If you wanted to do a slip stitch to join it together, that's absolutely fine. You then have the option to block your squares. So I do have this here to block my squares, but you can have a mat or a towel and use some pins. That will work equally as well. What I do is pop them each corner. So I find that corner chain, pop them on, and then I spray with a little bit of water here, and then wait for them to dry. The benefit of this is that you get some nice even squares that are all the same size. What I'm going to show you next is how to join the squares together. Now I have chosen to slip stitch the squares together. So the back of it, you know what, might move this out of the way. Let's move that over there, we've got a bit more room then. So the back looks like this, which you could quite easily have as the front as well, but I prefer to have it the other way around. It also gives you a little bit of flexibility then, so if your book is on the slightly bigger size, you can see there is a little bit of stretch in there, but it's still a really nice seam in the middle. So that is my preference of how to join the squares, but if you prefer to sew them or use a different type of stitch, there's so many different ways that you can join granny squares. So choose the one for you, but I'm going to show you how I do it with a slip stitch. So I'm just going to gather all my bits and I will be right back. Okay, so I've gathered all my bits. So I've already done one side of the book cover. I'm going to show you how to join those squares, and then we will join the two sides together and add a border. So what you want to make sure is that the side that you want facing out are together. So I have the back sides here, and the sides that we want to show at the front are in the middle. Then we're going to take our yarn. So I have chosen to use the same colour yarn as the outer round. Depending on how you're joining your squares together will depend on what colour you want to choose. So I'm going to take a slip knot onto my hook. So we have that X, hook under the first piece of yarn over the second and pull through. And what I'm going to do is join with a slip stitch to our corner. So I'm going to find one corner there and let's find the other corner there. Our end out the way. So where I have pulled the end across and weaved that in on the previous rounds, I don't do that this time around because I find it a bit faffy. So I'm going to leave it out to the side and weave that in at the end. So I'm going to take that yarn over, pull it through the two squares and then through that loop to secure into place. Then I'm going to look and find that first stitch here and our first stitch. Have I got that right? There and there. So it's there. I want to make sure I'm lining up correctly. And there. And there we go. Yep. So yarn over, pull that through both the stitches and then pull through the loop on our hook as well. So we work into the next one. So hopefully you can see here we've got our first stitch from one granny square, go straight through into the next stitch of the other granny square, yarn over, pull through, so that'll be 4 loops, pull through those 4 loops and then pull through the 5th loop which is on our hook. So we go in to those stitches, pull the yarn through and then pull through the loop. And we're going to do that all the way down. Take your time. Try not to pull too tightly because that will cause these to bunch a little bit and you want to keep its shape. So you don't want it too loose, but you also don't want it too tight. So what we're going to do once we've joined the corner is we're going to join the next 2 squares. Now, if for any reason you mismatched, you can go into the next stitch here and then go back into that one. If for whatever reason you've skipped one, I always think this is going to be on the inside, so it doesn't have to be hugely neat. It will look lovely on on the outside and no one will know. So if you did count wrong or mess it up, you can always do that. So now I'm going into my corner. So I have a corner and corner. Slip stitch that in there. So that is one joined together nicely here. And then what I'm going to do is take my next 2 squares. So again, this is what's going to be facing out. So I want to place them facing in together. So I have the reverse side facing out. I'm going to take my hook into the corner spaces here. And so this is going to be the center join. So I'm going to make this as a little bit tighter so it's nice and secure there. And then we go into our next stitch, which is there and there. And then we keep going. Slip stitch going through both. So sometimes you can go through back loop only. To do this, you could do this with a double crochet. You have the option to sew, and there are so many different ways that you can sew your granny square together. You know, there's no set way with crochet. I think you want to make sure that you're enjoying it, that you're comfortable, that you're happy. So take the route that you are comfortable with. Okay, so we're coming to our next corner here. I've got one more stitch here. Into that corner. So we now have the last 2 to join together to make our row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip stitch this together, and then I will show you how we come across and just work over the center here to keep it nice and tight and secure. So I have joined these 6 together through the middle. I've cut my yarn, fastened off. I did a chain 1 to secure that in place, and then when I'm weaving in the ends here, I like to kind of weave my way in and out a little bit, work my way down, go into the stitch here, just vary where I'm going, a bit like in a ziggy-zag to try and keep it as secure as possible. And I do a couple of my little makeshift knots to make sure we're nice and secure. And go over to the other side, work my way back, do the same thing. So we're as secure as we can be. There we go. I'm just making sure we're not overly tight. Going to do the same on the other end. I think we all have our own little ways with weaving in ends. But once you get into a little routine of it, kind of find what works best for you. There we go, right, cut those off. There we go, right, so let's lay this out. So there we have the centre together. So now I'm going to work on these rows, I don't know what to call it, rose lines, work them together and just show you how I work over the centre here. So I'm going to fold it again in, this is my front, so I'm going to fold them together. We're going to start in exactly the same way. Oh, my yarn's fallen down, hang on. There we go. So taking our slip knot round the finger, under and over, starting in exactly the same way, going into the corner space each side there, take the yarn over and through the loop there, secure in place with a slip stitch. And then we're going into our first, oh, why can't I get in you? Oh, that one's a bit tight for some reason. There we go, I got in. There we go. Right, yarn over, pull through or loop, slip stitch on. There we go, in the rhythm of it now. So exactly the same here, slip stitching through each stitch. And then I'll just show you what we do, or what I do, when we get to that join in the middle here. So you can see here, if I open it up a little bit, pull that yarn through a bit. Okay, it's a bit easier to see on this side. You can see kind of the join here. Can you see it here? I'm going to slip stitch into that here. Bring it a bit closer. So this, I'm going to slip stitch either side of the join to make sure that that, you know, the corners of the 4 squares join is nice and secure. So I'm going to go into here and then into here. Put my hook back in. So I'm going to go in that here. And then I'm going to come across. And the same here, just make sure I go into the right section there. There we are. And then you can continue working into the top of your granny square stitches there. Oh, I don't know what it is about this side. I've got another tight one again. There we go. And then we do that across our other side as well. So here and here. And then exactly the same with our slip stitch. We can then place our second side face down together, and we can then join around the edges. So I'm just going to finish joining up the middle of these squares and I will work around the edges with you. Okay, so I have finished joining the 2 sides of the book sleeve. Just to show you, if I stretch it out a little bit, you can hopefully see there, you get a nice kind of little diamond in the middle and a nice join and a nice little seam along the edges there. So this is what I'm going to use as the inside of the book sleeve. So now we need to join the two sides together, and we're pretty much going to do exactly the same as what we have been doing, making sure that the right side is facing in. So we would place the two sides on top of each other as so. You want to make sure that you start with a shorter side first. So we're going to go a short side, then a long side, then a short side, so that the book can go into the long side. Because the first time I did this, I made the mistake of starting on a long side. It just means you have extra ends to weave in, so it's not the end of the world. I'm playing yarn chicken a little bit because this is all that I have left, although I do have another ball of the off-white, but I'm hoping that this will be enough. I measured it out coming around, and it does fit round twice, which is normally my kind of go-to with extra on the end for weaving in the ends. So fingers crossed that should be okay. So I'm going to start in the corner of a short side. So starting off as we have with our slip knot, so taking a cross over our finger, under the first, over the second, and exactly the same as we have done, going into that corner of each side there. There we are. There was a lump where, oh, I can't find it now, but I didn't want that on the outside, so that's why I've just moved that round. And now I've got that caught in the way, get that round, there we go. And then I can get the yarn over and slip stitch that into the corner by taking the yarn through the hoop there. As I say, exactly the same as we have all the way along the short side, down the long and the other short side. We're going to take that slip stitch into each stitch along. So there is my first stitch. This happened on the other one. Don't know why, I always find that first stitch a little bit tricky. There we go. And then along we go. So making our way around, when it comes to the seam here, we want to do like we did when it came to the center, working either side. So I'll just show you when we come to it here. And I don't know what your preference is, but I really do prefer crocheting granny squares together. But you want to make sure you're happy when you're doing your project, so it's taking the one that you like the best. So I'm now at the stitch either side here. Now I want to go straight in to the other side here, so I'm going to go in there, in there, to make sure it's nice and secure, and then we go back into our stitches. So we're going to keep coming, and when we get to our corner, we are going one more and we get to our corner. Just going, oh, there we are. So I'm just going to go into the corner there with a slip stitch, and I'm going to go in, and I'm just going to go into the next stitch. So I'm not going to do any extra stitches. I'm just going to work my way around, going into each stitch. So you want to continue that all along your long side and along the other short side, and I'll join you when we get to the end here. Okay, so I have finished seaming this together. I cut my yarn, fastened off and weaved in the ends as well. So this is the inside of the book sleeve. So I'm gonna turn it the right way around. Push the corners out. Okay. So from there, we just want to make this a little bit defined. So I'm going to add a little border around the top. Now you may want to measure with your book, because this is perfect for a paperback size book, but if they obviously come in lots of different sizes, this will fit your standard one, but the slightly bigger one, this will still fit, but you might need a bit more width here. So this would be a good time to check that your book does fit the sleeve. So we're going to take a double crochet around the top edge, just as we did before. We're going to start with that slip knot. So taking an X over the finger, taking the hook under the first piece of yarn over the second to secure in place. It's up to you where you start. I'm going to start in the middle of the first square on the edge here. So I'm going to take my hook through the first stitch. I'm going to slip stitch on, and I'm going to chain one. Now, as I did when we were making the rounds here, I'm going to secure this tail end in place to help me save time with weaving in later. And then just in each stitch as we go around, I'm going to take a double crochet, and if you work with US terminology, that is a single crochet. So we take the hook through the stitch, yarn over, pull through. We've got 2 loops on the hook, so we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So into the next stitch we go, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And we're going to do that all the way around to create a nice border. Now when we come to our little end here, we're just going to go either side of the join here. So I'm going to go into this side of the join, and then I'm going to come over to the other side of the join here to make a nice smooth transition over. And when you've got enough yarn left over, if you are weaving that end like I just did, we then just take that out the way, and then we can carry on with our double crochet, working around the edge of our book sleeve. So what I'm going to do is carry on going all the way around and meet you back here. So I've just created that double crochet all the way around. I'm coming up to my first stitch, so I'm going to slip stitch into that, and then I'm going to slip stitch in every stitch around. Now if you did need to make your book sleeve a little bit wider, this is where you could add another row of double crochets. but that's fine for me. So I'm then going to just take a slip stitch in each stitch all the way around, so taking the hook through that stitch and pulling the yarn all the way through, and that's just gonna create a nice edge to finish off the book sleeve. So I will keep going around with this slip stitch all the way around, and I will meet you back at our first slip stitch once I've taken this all the way around. Okay, so I've just finished slip stitching around the edge of the book cover there. I personally think that makes a great difference. It finishes it off really nicely. So what I'm going to do then, I would recommend an invisible join here. So I'm going to cut my yarn, pull it through the hook and place into my needle here. And then what I'm going to do is go into the first, which is here, the first slip stitch. So instead of going over the top, I'm kind of going along the side and back in here. And I'm just going through a couple of layers there and just making sure that's the same size space as with the others. Yeah, and then you can go ahead and weave that in as you have been doing. Now, this is a flexible pattern with regards to the yarn that you're using, the colours that you're using, but also it's easily adaptable with the size of the book that you want to make the cover for as well. So if it's a slightly smaller book, you can size down with your, so you could go to a 3.5 or a 3mm needle, and the other way, if it's a larger book, you can, like a hardback book, I might size up to a 4.5. And then you've also got the option of adding in extra rows here. You could also, at the bottom and sides, add extra rows if it was a really thick book. I was looking at my Harry Potter books the other day. They're very wide, so you would want to add a couple of rows in the seams for a book that's quite large, as for example Harry Potter. So it can be a little bit of trial and error, but as long as you've got the book with you as you're making it, then it's fine. You'll be able to measure it as you go along and kind of see what you need to do there. So we'll just, that's already been weaved in a little bit, so I'm just going to go back through here. And then just as an example, so I made this with the Summer I Turn Pretty books in mind. These are the same books but just different versions, so you can see the different sizes here. So if I pop this one in, so this is the slightly smaller one, so you can see fits perfectly, but there's room to give there and it comes over the top nicely. And then we have same book but just slightly bigger version, and where the yarn will have a little bit of give to it. Remember, if you are using like an acrylic yarn, it will probably have more give than this cotton yarn does, and that fits pretty snugly in there. So you can leave it like this, or you could add some form of tie. You could chain, put 2 chains either side or in the middle and have a little bow. You could place a button and then chain a hook here to attach. You could add a button and then wind a chain around to attach it onto the button. There's lots and lots of options that you can take if you want to create some form of join to your book. But that is our book sleeve all complete. So I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial and I hope you've enjoyed working with this granny square pattern. I'd love to see any designs that you do make, so do tag me on social media if you do make this book sleeve. Thank you so much for joining me and happy crocheting!